I was told that I was not big enough and maybe not fast enough or not strong enough.
He did it! He did it! The greatest goal scorer in National Hockey League history!
But we all dream and sit there and say, my goodness, wouldn't this be great if I could be part of the National Hockey League? And there's no question I would stand there for hours hoping that one day I would get a chance to play in the NHL. Hopefully my name will change the thoughts that kids have and parents have and coaches have about youngsters, that if you put your mind to it, you can be successful at this sport.
Yes, Wayne Gretzky will be a guest here on Tim and Sid on Thursday. We assume Tim and Sid will want to be back for that one. But right now it's Jeff, Blair, and Stephen Brunt here filling in for the guys, both of whom are on the DL today. And from one Edmonton legend, we go to another. Gene Principe joins us as the Oilers get set to host the Senators tonight. Gene, the Oilers could be active at this upcoming trade deadline, couldn't they?
Yes, they can, Stephen and Jeff. I know you guys are big baseball fans. Nice of you to come out of the bullpen to fill in for Tim and Sid, and I hope Tim and Sid are feeling fine, especially with the great one on the way. Thank you for the Legends comment. I appreciate that. Well, Peter Chiarelli will be a legend around here.
My idea.
If he's able to get... Well, if he gets them into the playoffs, I think that he'll be considered a legend, because this team has not been there since 2006. If he wins a Stanley Cup, they might name a street after him, just like Wayne Gretzky Drive. But heading into Monday, it wasn't exactly breaking news today when Peter Chiarelli spoke on how the Oilers plan to spend next Monday.
It will be a seller. It has to be the right player or future asset coming back. But you're right. I mean, these guys are probably on pins and needles. You move some players out, and then you've got you got a team that's devoid of a couple of players. But having said that, like, we're in last place, so you hope that the pride is there, and they also are going to be under the microscope from me for the rest of the year, because we're still, this is still a landscape we're looking at, and obviously it's not good enough, so there will be changes. The sky isn't falling. As much as it feels that it is, it's not falling. There's the ability to make this team a contending team, and it can be in a hurry.
Yeah, how about, could you do it this year, Peter? Well, maybe that might be asking a bit too much. But Peter, when he was the general manager of the Boston Bruins, Jeff and Stephen, the first year he was there, they didn't make the playoffs. Second year they did. So, if you're an Oilers fan, that's probably what you're hanging on to. And throw in the fact if Connor McDavid's healthy next year, maybe they got a better chance if he makes the moves he wants to, either at the deadline or in the summer.
Now, Gene, most sellers at the deadline are looking for picks and prospects. They're trying to get cheaper and younger. But this is a very young team. What's Ciarelli going to be looking for going into the deadline, and who's on the block here potentially?
Well, I think it's quite clear that he is looking for a defenseman or defensemen. He really feels like that is an area of weakness on the part of the Oilers right now. They have some young players like Darnell Nurse and Oscar Klefbom, and a lesser-known player like Brandon Davidson, who fill out maybe half of the roster, but they're looking to try and fill out the back half of that. As for who's available, well, Connor McDavid isn't. I can tell you that much. And after that, I'm not sure. The one thing he said, Stephen and Jeff, is that maybe for the first time when it comes to general managers of the Oilers, they're willing to go at the core of the team. And for those that watch the Oilers know who the core is, so he may have to break some of that up in order to build it back up for this team to get a little bit closer to getting into the playoffs sometime soon, instead of being in 30th place.
But they're going to be looking, Gene, for, you're talking about defensemen, for guys who can play next year, right? That's the future is now, and I know it's a last place team, but the future is now for this team, isn't it?
Yep. I would agree. Much of their core that I just spoke of is either getting into their early to mid-20s. So this is really the time to strike if you're going to build a cup contender, not just for 1 or 2 years, but have some longevity. The thing is this, Peter Chiarelli's jumping into this. This is year 1 for him. So for him, he wants to win, but there is some level of patience. If you're an Oilers fan, you've been going through this for a decade. So it's important for him, and he addressed the fact that he doesn't want to rush his plan because Joe Joe and Tom and Bill and Steve and Larry have been sitting through this for a decade, wondering when is this team going to get better. So we'll wait to see, but I would expect that this summer is really when Peter Chiarelli will make his mark as general manager of the Edmonton Oilers.
And Gene, that's kind of to be expected, isn't it? Because let's face it, in Todd McLellan and Peter Chiarelli, you've got two guys now running the show who really they don't have any emotional investment to a lot of these draft picks. You know, they want to win. And you're getting a fresh set of eyes, in this instance, two fresh set of eyes, looking at what has been in some ways a pretty static team.
Yeah, and I think, guys, listen, I'm assuming that, generally speaking, in the NHL, others have looked at the Edmonton Oilers from afar and said, well, if I was the coach, if I was the GM, here's what I would do, and here's how I turn around the team. Then you get into it. And Peter Chiarelli admitted this morning, you know, people are going, is this harder than you thought? Is this more difficult? And he said, listen, I understood, and so did Todd, that there would be a lot of heavy lifting in regards to getting this organization off the mat and back to those days that we spoke of Wayne Gretzky. Well, the heavy lifting started at the draft. It's continued and will through the trade deadline. And then next summer, he has a chance to really mold this club and see who he can add in order to, you know, I don't know if they need to make the playoffs next year, but there has to be some growth. Otherwise, you know, it's going to get more and more difficult. He did say as well that if the Oilers have first, second, third overall picks somewhere in there, he'd consider trading it if he feels he can get one of those players you talked about who's maybe early or mid-20s and is ready to jump in and make an impact right now, not an 18-year-old.
You ready, Gene, for the reaction when the Oil get the first overall again?
Oh, Steven, where's Tim and Sid? Oh, yeah, you know what, 5 and 7 years might be a bit too much for anybody to handle. I mean, once or twice or 3 or 4, but not 5. That's not a good number around here to try and get that first overall pick for a 5th time in 7 seasons.
Hey, Gene, how are the Oilers fans? I mean, you talked about how patient they are. Do they have faith in this new brain trust? Are they kind of seeing what we're seeing, that you've got two guys in here who are taking notes and who, as I said, may not have a problem moving out some guys that, you know, heretofore were kind of guys you didn't touch?
I would say that's exactly right. I think if the coach were, and I'm just going to say Dallas Eakins, or if the general manager were Craig McTavish, I mean, it would not be nearly as calm a situation around here. I don't think that people are pointing any fingers at Todd McLellan or at Peter Chiarelli. Instead, they're pointing it at, you know, previous management and current players. So, you know, the frustration level is high, but because the major players have changed in the GM spot and in the coach's spot, that I think people are willing to give them some time. But I've been through that a few times where new people come in and people are patient for a while and then they start to get impatient. I think that with Peter and Todd, they've got time, no problem. But if we're in this situation a year from now, then the patience level will be not nearly as easy to handle.
Mr. Principe, we're going to let you run. You will be part of our coverage tonight, of course, the Sens and Oilers. You can see that on Sportsnet West. An Edmonton legend. Great pleasure to talk to you.
Nice job pinch hitting, boys.
Thank you. Gene Principe of Sportsnet. And he is an Edmonton legend.
Darn right. Yeah, it's a fascinating situation out there, isn't it, though? You know, they're going into the new rink, kind of spun your wheels this year with McDavid getting, like spun your wheels, like spun backwards with McDavid getting hurt. But that sense of, and a bunch of guys, as you said, the previous administrations might have been in love with them, but there's not a lot of allegiance for anybody pre-McDavid with this group.
No, and you know what? It's kind of interesting. You watch Connor McDavid, and we saw this maybe earlier in the season. You watch him with all that young talent that the Oilers have, and it really is driven home just how good he is. I mean, he is everything that everybody has said he was going to be.
Not all number ones are created equally.
Not all number ones
are created. Edmonton, just ask them.
Yes, and again, the Oilers at the trade deadline, I tend to think Gene's probably right. If I'm the Oilers, unless somebody's really going to give me a guy who can help me next year and who can log a lot of minutes, I'm probably waiting to do the heavy lifting in the offseason.
Yeah, agreed.
You know, and I would think that there's probably not a great deal you know, not a great deal of pressure from fans. I mean, they've been patient already. Why can't they continue to be patient?